She whispered, "Please don't let him find me." The truth that followed left him shattered. The storm didn't just roll in, it devoured the coastline. A wind slammed against shuttered windows. Pine trees groaned beneath the weight of ice. And in the small, isolated fishing village of Driftwood Bay, where silence was usually sacred, even the gulls had gone quiet. Jonah McBride stood at the window of his cabin, one hand wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug, the other resting on the soft gray head of Kaya, his 13-year-old Belgian Malinois. The fire crackled, fighting to keep the cold from clawing its way in. He'd long since stopped expecting visitors. No one came this far north during winter, not unless they were running from something, or towards something they couldn't name. Jonah wasn't sure which one he was. Once a decorated Coast Guard handler, Jonah had seen things in the Bering Sea most men wouldn't dare dream. But nothing cut deeper than losing his only child. Ava had vanished from his life 5 years ago without a goodbye. Just a voicemail, and then nothing. No calls, no letters, just a gap in his soul, shaped like her laugh. Kaya shifted suddenly, ears pricked, body tense. Jonah felt her go still beneath his hand. She gave a low, throaty sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Then she stood tail stiff and padded to the door. She barked once, sharp, deliberate, then scratched, hard. "What is it, girl?" Jonah asked, his voice low, his brows furrowed. But Kaya didn't wait. With the instinct of a soldier still on duty, she pressed her nose against the doorframe and barked again, then looked back. That was all Jonah needed. He grabbed his parka from the hook, shoved his boots on over thick wool socks, and slipped his sidearm into its place out of sheer habit. Then he opened the door. The wind hit him like a slap. Snow came sideways, thick as cotton, blinding. Kaya darted out into it without hesitation. "Kaya," he shouted, but the storm swallowed her name. Jonah hesitated for only a second. Then he plunged into the white. It was like moving through wet cement. The air burned. His breath came ragged. But he followed the dog's trail, her paw prints fresh in the blanketing snow, around the side of the cabin, past the shed, and down the path toward the shoreline. Then he saw her. At first it looked like driftwood or a pile of laundry tossed by the wind. But as Jonah came closer, the shape under the pier resolved into a child. A little girl, maybe 7, maybe 8, curled in on herself, her skin pale as paper, her lips purple. She was wearing a threadbare ballet costume, bare legs, torn sleeves, and a single blue mitten. Beside her, Kaya stood like a statue, tail lowered, head lowered, further nose, gently brushing the girl's forehead. Jonah fell to his knees, the cold searing through denim like needles. Hey, sweetheart," he murmured, reaching to brush damp strands of hair from her cheek. Her eyelids fluttered. "Please," she whispered, her voice faint. "Don't let him find me." Jonah's throat clenched. "You're safe now," he said, pulling her into his arms. She was light, too light, a weightless thing. As he lifted her, he noticed the tag on her wrist, a plastic hospital band with one word. Eden. Kaya turned, waiting. Jonah looked down at the girl again. She didn't resist. She just held on to something in her hand, a small, cracked music box, clutched so tightly it looked like part of her. He cradled her tighter and looked toward the house. "Come on, girl," he said to Kaya, his voice hoarse. They moved as one, man, dog, and child, into the whiteout. And behind them, the wind howled like it had just lost something sacred. The cabin door banged open with a gust of snow and salt air. Jonah stumbled inside. Eden clutched tight to his chest, her frozen limbs barely responsive. Kaya followed close behind her, fur heavy with ice, tail low, but alert. The door slammed shut behind them, muffling the storm's rage. Jonah dropped to his knees by the hearth, laying Eden gently on a thick wool blanket spread before the fire. Her ballet costume clung to her skin, soaked and frayed at the edges, offering no warmth. Just the haunting question, why was a little girl in a tutu outside in a blizzard? He peeled the wet fabric from her limbs as gently as he could, layer by trembling layer. Her skin was marbled with pale blue and red blotches, and her right foot was bare. One mitten was missing. Her fingers gripped the music box with surprising strength. She wouldn't let go, even unconscious. Kaya, Jonah rasped, nodding to the kettle. The dog padded toward the small kitchen, bumping her nose against a lower cabinet. Jonah didn't believe in talking to dogs like they understood everything, but sometimes Kaya made him wonder. He wrapped Eden in 3 thick blankets, placing hot water bottles at her sides and tucking one beneath her arms. Then he moved fast, grabbing a thermometer heating broth, rummaging for the emergency glucose gel he kept in the first aid kit. He whispered to her as he worked his voice low, steady, trying to anchor her in sound. "You're gonna be okay, Eden. I got you now. You're safe. Just hang on, sweetheart." She flinched. Her head rolled slightly. Her eyes cracked open, just a sliver, and she blinked up at the wooden rafters. Then her lips parted. "Please," she whispered again, her voice raw. "Don't let him find me." Jonah froze. His eyes met Kaya's, who stood now beside, Eden ears forward, body rigid. Eden turned her face into the pillow, her voice almost too soft to catch. "He said he'd come back. If I told..." Jonah sat back on his heels, jaw tight. Who would do this to a kid? He didn't ask, not yet. Instead, he placed a mug of warm broth beside her and said gently, "You don't have to talk right now. You just need to rest. You're not alone anymore." She didn't answer, but her small fingers, still white from cold, finally loosened just enough for Jonah to gently slide the music box from her grip. It was a delicate thing, old, brass-cornered and scratched. The paint was chipped, but the figure inside, a porcelain dancer mid-spin, was mostly intact. He tried to turn the key, but it was jammed with ice. He set it aside and knelt again beside Eden. "Do you know your last name?" he asked, voice low. Eden's eyes fluttered, then focused on the photo above the mantel. It was a faded picture of a young woman in uniform, smiling, vibrant eyes like wildfire. "My mom looked like her," Eden murmured just loud enough to be heard. Jonah's blood ran colder than the snow outside. "That's Ava," he said quietly. "My daughter." Eden stared at the photo. She used to play a song, the ballerina song. Jonah reached for the music box again, heart pounding. It was Ava's. It had to be. He studied Eden's face now in the firelight. Oval chin, high cheekbones, soft freckles across the nose. She looked so familiar. Too familiar. "Where's your mother now?" he asked, bracing for the answer. Eden's breath hitched. "She got sick," she whispered. "Real bad. I tried to wake her up, but she didn't." Jonah swallowed hard. A long pause stretched between them. "I ran," she added, her voice quivering. "I didn't know where else to go. But I remembered the picture. She said you were her dad." Jonah stared at her. The blue mitten, the music box, the photo, the lullaby. Every thread suddenly knotted together into something terrifying and precious. You came to find me?" he asked, stunned. Eden turned her head toward him. Her expression was fragile, guarded, and full of something that broke his heart. "I didn't want to," she said, "but I didn't know where else to go. And she said, if anything happened, you'd keep me safe." Jonah looked away for a moment. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from something deeper. "I will," he said finally, his voice solid. "I will, Eden. No one's ever going to hurt you again." Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the cabin, something had shifted. A thread had been pulled from silence. And though Eden was still cold, still fragile, something about the firelight in her eyes made Jonah believe, maybe for the first time in years, that healing had already begun. The storm blew for 2 more days. Thick drifts piled up against the cabin walls like sleeping giants. Trees bowed under the weight of snow, and the generator rumbled like a distant heartbeat, keeping the old place warm enough to hold back the cold. Inside, Jonah moved quietly, gathering firewood from the back shed, boiling water for tea, and adding broth to Eden's cup, even when she said she wasn't hungry. She didn't speak much, but she did speak. It came in flickers, small tentative phrases that made Jonah listen more carefully than he had in years. "Your dog, she smells like lavender," she said one morning, running her fingers through Kaya's thick gray fur. "That's because she sleeps on the old wool blanket my daughter used to keep on the porch." Jonah replied, "I never could get the scent out." Eden tilted her head. "Your daughter? Ava." Jonah stiffened slightly but nodded. "Yeah." Eden didn't say anything right away. But later, while he refilled the firewood box, she wandered over to the stone fireplace. Her eyes lingered on the photo of Ava in uniform, strong, smiling, proud. Was her name Ava Marie McBride? Eden asked, her voice soft, almost rehearsed. Jonah turned from the window, heart climbing into his throat. "Yes," he said slowly. "Why?" Eden didn't answer directly. She just said, She had this way of talking, like she believed you could do anything if you just looked her in the eye. Jonah felt something inside him fracture and swell at the same time. He lowered himself into the chair beside the hearth, careful of the old war injury that made his hip ache in the cold. Kaya lay stretched between them, eyes half-lidded, but ears still tuned to every word. "She used to sing to me," Eden whispered. "Not like lullabies, more like stories. She made up songs about whales and fireflies and invisible sisters." Jonah gave a low chuckle. "That sounds like Ava. She was always the dramatic one." Eden nodded but didn't smile. "Where did you live with her?" he asked gently. Eden picked at a thread on the blanket draped over her knees. "We moved around a lot. After she got sick, we ended up in a shelter near Anchorage. Then, she didn't wake up one morning. After that, a man came to get me, said he was her friend, said I'd be safe. She looked up, eyes wide and flat like ocean glass. He lied." Jonah's chest tightened. He wanted to press for details to know who this man was, what he'd done, how Eden had ended up alone in a snowstorm wearing a ballet costume. But pushing too hard might close her down again. So instead, he asked something else. "Do you remember how you got here, to Driftwood Bay?" Eden nodded faintly. "I ran away. He was yelling. I got scared. I remembered the picture. Ava always kept it in her coat pocket. Said one day we'd find you, but she didn't make it that far. So I did." Jonah leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You remembered a photo and followed it. It had an address on the back," she said, in her handwriting. "I found it in her coat after she was gone." Jonah sat back stunned. Ava had left breadcrumbs. Even in her final days, alone, sick, scared, she'd believed enough in him to guide her daughter back. And Eden, this brave, quiet little soul, had followed those breadcrumbs across a frozen state. That night, Jonah cooked real food, mashed potatoes, grilled chicken, and green beans. Eden ate slowly, chewing each bite like it might disappear if she wasn't careful. Kaya lay under the table, head on her paws, tail thudding lightly whenever Eden reached down to pet her. After dinner, Eden asked did Ava like to read. Jonah smiled. She was a book hoarder, always had her nose in something. Ghost stories, mostly. The scarier, the better. Eden perked up slightly. "She told me stories like that. She said they made her feel brave." Jonah stood and walked to the old bookshelf beside the fireplace. He pulled down a tattered paperback with a cracked spine and handed it to her. "She loved this one," he said. Eden took it gently, like it was made of glass. "Can I read a little before bed?" "Of course." That night, Jonah passed her room to check in. The lamp was on dim and warm. Eden sat cross-legged under the blankets, reading aloud in a whisper, the book resting on Kaya's back. The dog didn't move, just listened, like the words were holding her there as much as the warmth. Jonah stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the child's voice blend with the soft scratch of turning pages. Not long ago, that hallway echoed with silence and grief. Now it carried the sound of life returning. The next morning, Jonah sat at his workbench in the corner of the living room, the old music box resting in his weathered hands. The metal casing was cracked but intact. A faded ballerina, her porcelain paint chipped at the elbows, was fixed mid-spin under a glass dome. The winding key was stuck, its brass teeth bent ever so slightly from years of use, or maybe from clenched fingers, too afraid to let it go. He squinted under the desk lamp tools spread out before him. Kaya lay beside the wood stove, snoring softly. Eden, wrapped in one of Ava's oversized flannel shirts, sat at the kitchen table, drawing silently in a sketch pad Jonah had found in a storage bin. "You always good with your hands?" she asked, breaking the morning stillness. Jonah looked up surprised. "Comes from years of fixing boat engines that should have been retired decades ago," he replied with a small smile. "Music boxes are trickier, though. They got hearts in them, tiny little ones. If you force them open, they never sound quite the same again." Eden stared at him for a moment. "That's what she said," she murmured. "Who?" "My mom, Ava. She said music was just feeling with a voice. You can't force it." Jonah's fingers froze. He bent over the mechanism again, gently nudging the spring into place. After a soft click, the ballerina twitched, then turned. A mechanical ping echoed from within, soft and ghostly. Then it began to play, a few slow tinkling notes, then a melody, delicate and familiar. Jonah's breath caught in his throat. "Skater's Lullaby." The same tune Ava used to hum as a child while watching snowfall from the windowsill. She had composed it herself in high school, played it over and over on an old upright piano Jonah could barely afford back then. Said it made her feel like time could stand still for just a second. He hadn't heard it in 15 years. Eden looked up from her drawing. Her eyes widened. Then slowly, as if stepping into memory, she began to hum along. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't guesswork. She knew every note. Jonah's hand trembled as the song continued. The ballerina twirled in the glass dome, and Eden's voice blended with it in soft harmony. Not perfect, but warm, familiar. "You knew this?" he asked hoarsely. Eden nodded. "She used to sing it while brushing my hair. Said she wrote it for you first, but then it became mine." Jonah swallowed hard. How long did she keep it with her? "Always," Eden whispered. "She carried the box in a scarf when we didn't have bags. She wouldn't sleep without it. Said the music helped her stay brave." Jonah turned the music box over, inspecting the underside. A tiny metal plate was bolted to the base. He unscrewed it gently, revealing a folded scrap of paper tucked beneath. It was a single line of handwritten music. Underneath in Ava's familiar script, "For when she needs to remember who she is." Jonah passed it to Eden without a word. She traced the curve of each note with her fingertip. "This was ours," she said, voice small but certain. "No matter where we went. Even when we were scared." She said, "As long as we had this, we weren't lost." Kaya rose and walked over, pressing her head beneath Eden's hand. Jonah leaned back in the chair. His mind swirled with questions. Why hadn't Ava called? Why had she hidden this child from him? Had she really been alone all that time? But none of that mattered now. The child was here, and her voice, quiet, pure, familiar, had brought Ava's memory back into this house in a way photos and silence never could. He picked up the music box again and wound it gently. The melody restarted. This time Eden sang a line out loud. "When the snow forgets to fall, I'll find you dancing in the dark." Jonah looked at her eyes, stinging. "That was her line," he whispered. Eden looked up, confused. "I mean, she used to sing that exact line to me," he said, voice low. "Before her piano recitals. I hadn't heard it in decades." Eden blinked. "She said it was your line. That you made it up during a storm when she was little, when she was scared." Jonah closed his eyes. "It was a bedtime lyric made up on the fly during a thunderstorm when Ava was 6. He had no idea she remembered it, let alone passed it on." Kaya let out a soft grunt and nudged her muzzle into Eden's lap. Jonah sat back staring at the ceiling for a long moment. Somewhere in the ticking of the cabin's old wall clock and the creak of the beams and the fading notes of the music box, he heard something else now. A heartbeat. Not his, not Eden's, not even Kaya's. It was the pulse of something returning, something sacred. Family. That evening, as the wind softened and the fire settled into a steady hum, Jonah sat on the floor beside a worn cardboard box marked "Ava, do not throw away" in thick black Sharpie. The handwriting was unmistakable, defiant, confident, just like she was. He hadn't opened it in 5 years, not since the day he got the call from Anchorage Memorial. "We're sorry to inform you. Your daughter never regained consciousness. No next of kin to claim her body. No listed child. Just a girl who'd vanished from his life one night and never come back. Until now." Eden sat at the table drawing again, this time sketching a figure holding a music box in one hand, a leash in the other. The dog beside her looked unmistakably like Kaya. Jonah peeled back layers of old sheet music photographs, half-written postcards, and crumpled theater flyers from Ava's high school days. Then, tucked between a playbill and an envelope filled with ticket stubs, he found it a sealed letter, yellowed at the edges. "To Dad, if I ever get brave enough." Jonah hesitated. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the flap. The paper inside was creased but intact. Her handwriting flowed in uneven loops, the kind she used when she wrote quickly, like her heart was pushing her words faster than her hand could keep up. "Dad, if you're reading this, I probably couldn't say it to your face. Maybe I was scared, maybe ashamed, or maybe I thought you'd never forgive me. But I need you to know. I had a daughter. Her name is Eden. I didn't tell you because I was still trying to protect her. From him, from the world, and maybe even from myself. I left because I thought I was doing the right thing. But I've never stopped wishing you could know her. I named her after something I'd never had, a safe place, a beginning. If anything happens to me and this letter reaches you, please, Dad, don't let her disappear. Let her be someone's reason to stay. Love you always. Ava. Jonah lowered the letter. His breath caught somewhere between his chest and throat. He looked across the room at Eden, who now sat with her back to him, humming faintly under her breath. The same lullaby. The same tune Ava had composed in her bedroom all those years ago when Jonah thought he had all the time in the world to protect her. Kaya patted over and rested her head on his knee. He reached down and rubbed behind her ears, whispering, "She's ours, old girl. She's Ava's." Just then the cabin phone rang, an old rotary wall piece mounted by the pantry. It startled Eden, who jumped slightly, knocking over her pencil. Jonah picked up. McBride residence, he answered automatically, though no one had called in months. The voice on the other end was shaky, elderly, female. Is this Jonah McBride? Yes. This is Sister Elaine from the Northern Hearth Shelter. I think I knew your daughter, Ava. Jonah straightened. Go on. She volunteered with us after leaving Anchorage, helped with the kids. She never said much, but she always had that music box, always carried it like it was sacred. She used to sing at bedtime even when her lungs were bad. She never told me who Eden's father was, but she asked me once, if anything ever happened to her, could I find you? Jonah swallowed hard. I think she found me instead, he said. She kept a journal. Sister Elaine added. She left it behind, said not to open it unless a man named Jonah ever came asking about Eden. Jonah gave her the cabin's address. Can you send it? Already in the mail, sweetheart, the old woman replied. When he hung up, Eden looked up from the table. Who was it? A friend of your mom's, Jonah said. She stared at him. You knew, she asked softly. He walked over and knelt in front of her. I know now, he said, and I know I should have known sooner. I can't fix what happened before, but I can promise this. He paused, emotion tightening his voice. You're not going anywhere. You're mine. You always were. Eden looked down at her drawing, then back up. Even if I'm a mess, she asked, barely above a whisper. Jonah smiled through watery eyes. Especially then, he said, because so was Ava, and so am I. Kaya groaned and flopped down beside them, nudging her head into Eden's lap. And for the first time, Eden laughed. Just a little. But enough for Jonah to believe this wasn't just a reunion. It was the start of something entirely new. The storm broke on the third morning. Sunlight spilled through the frosted windows like gold seeping into a forgotten room. For the first time in days, Jonah stepped out onto the porch with a steaming mug in hand and felt the air still. No wind, no snow. Just a vast silence stretching across Driftwood Bay. He didn't trust it. Neither did Kaya. She stood beside him, unusually tense, her gaze locked on the tree line that bordered the old trail down to the docks. Her ears twitched, her nose lifted. What is it, girl? Jonah asked. Kaya didn't answer. She just growled. Low, warning. Jonah followed her gaze and froze. A man was standing just beyond the trees, too far to make out clearly, but close enough to see the dark outline of a winter coat and the glint of something metallic in his hand. A flashlight, a knife. He didn't move, just stood there. Watching the cabin, Jonah's grip on his coffee tightened. He stepped backward into the house, closing the door slowly and flipping the bolt. Kaya growled again. Eden was in the kitchen pouring cereal into a bowl, humming Skater's Lullaby under her breath. She looked up when Jonah entered the hum, catching in her throat. What's wrong? She asked. Jonah walked over, crouched beside her. Did the man who took you, ever come this far north? Eden's face paled. Her hands clenched the cereal box. He said if I told anyone, he'd find me. Kaya patted over and leaned into her. Jonah gently placed his hand on Eden's shoulder. I think he might be here, but I'm calling someone. Right now. Within minutes, Jonah had Deputy Lorraine Cook from the town's small law enforcement outpost on the phone. A tough woman in her early 50s, Lorraine had known Jonah since his Coast Guard days. She didn't ask questions, just promised to send someone up to the cabin within the hour. But that wasn't enough. Jonah opened the gun cabinet and quietly loaded the old bolt-action rifle he kept for bear encounters. He checked the locks, pulled the curtains, set Kaya near Eden with a single command. Stay close. Protect. He stepped onto the porch again. The man was gone. Only a set of boot prints remained in the snow, leading away toward the tree line. An hour later, Officer Taylor arrived, young, nervous, and clearly new to real-world threats. Jonah gave him a mug of coffee and led him through the story, while Eden sat curled on the couch, arms wrapped around Kaya. I ran his name through the system, Taylor said, after reviewing the hospital bracelet and Ava's letter. Mark Jessup. He's got warrants out of Anchorage, kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and suspected child trafficking. Last seen heading west on foot 2 weeks ago. Jonah stiffened. You think he's here now? I think he's looking for something, or someone, that slipped through his fingers. Eden didn't speak until the officer left. Then she asked, if he finds me, will they take me back? Jonah looked at her, stunned. No one is taking you anywhere, he said. You hear me? You didn't run away. You survived. There's a difference. Eden's chin quivered. He said I was just someone's mistake, that no one would keep me for long. Jonah sat beside her and took her hand. Then he's never met a McBride, he said, because we don't let go. That night, Jonah filed for emergency guardianship. He printed Ava's letter, collected Eden's hospital records, took photos of the music box, called Lorraine again, and requested a welfare hearing. He also installed a new deadbolt, just in case. After Eden fell asleep, Jonah walked the perimeter with Kaya. The footprints were gone now. Snow covered them quickly. But the unease lingered like a chill that couldn't be shaken. Jonah returned inside to find Eden standing in the living room, barefoot holding a flashlight. She looked at him, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. I heard something outside my window. Jonah's heart dropped. He strode to the window. Nothing but moonlight and frost. I checked, she added, but I didn't open the curtain. I remembered what Ava used to say. What's that? If you feel fear in your bones, don't let it into your voice. That's how you stay strong. Jonah knelt down, hands on her shoulders. You are strong, Eden, but you don't have to be strong alone anymore. She nodded slowly. Then, almost like she was testing him, she whispered, I don't want to hide anymore. Jonah stood and pulled the thick curtain wide open. The forest stared back, empty and quiet. You don't have to, he said, not while you're here. Kaya sat beside Eden, pressing her warm weight into the girl's side. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. But inside, Jonah realized something more important had started. Eden was no longer running. She was standing her ground. The next morning began with a thump of mail against the front porch. Jonah opened the door and found a padded envelope lying in the snow, the sender marked as Northern Hearth Shelter, Sister Elaine. He brought it inside, brushed off the frost, and opened it at the kitchen table while Eden warmed her hands on a mug of cocoa. Inside was a small navy blue journal, Ava's. Jonah flipped it open and immediately recognized her handwriting. The first page read, If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. But she did. Her name is Eden. She's strong, stronger than I ever was. Please, Dad, fight for her. Jonah didn't cry. He'd run out of tears years ago. But his hands trembled, and that was enough. He placed the journal gently on the table, then looked across at Eden. You ready to talk to someone official? Eden looked down at Kaya, who sat like a statue beside her. Then she nodded. I am, if it means I get to stay. Later that afternoon, a knock came at the door. Jonah opened it to find Danielle Ortega, a social worker from the state's Office of Child Welfare, and Deputy Lorraine Cook, wrapped in a forest green parka of snow, melting on her boots. Danielle had a calm, patient presence. Early 40s, tidy brown braid clipboard in hand, and eyes that scanned everything with quiet intensity. We'd like to speak with Eden, Danielle said gently. Just a few questions. Eden stood behind Jonah in the hallway, gripping the strap of her overalls, but stepped forward before he could say anything. I'll talk to her, she said. Danielle crouched to her level. Can I sit with you and Kaya? Eden nodded, and they moved to the living room. Kaya instantly took position beside her, resting her head on Eden's knee. Danielle asked the first question. Eden, can you tell me who took care of you before Jonah? Eden hesitated. A man named Mark. He said he was a friend of my mom's, but he wasn't. He locked me in a basement after she died. Did he ever hurt you? Eden nodded but didn't speak. Danielle didn't push. Did your mom ever talk about Jonah? Eden reached into her backpack and pulled out the photo. The one of Ava in uniform, with Jonah's handwritten note on the back. She said if anything happened to go here, to find him. Danielle took the photo, then the hospital bracelet Eden had been wearing, then the music box. Jonah handed her the letter from Ava, the DNA test results confirming his relationship, and a notarized affidavit from the shelter director that detailed Ava's last months. Danielle read through the documents carefully, her expression softening with every page. Deputy Cook stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes watching the woods beyond. Finally, Danielle looked up. "Jonah, do you want guardianship?" "I want her to have a life," he said. "One that doesn't start with running. One that ends in safety. If I can give her that, then yes. I want it." Eden looked at him surprised. Then she whispered, "You still want me, even after all of this?" Jonah knelt beside her, took her hand, and said softly, "Eden, you're not what happened to you. You're who you're becoming, and I want to see who that is." Danielle tapped her clipboard. "Well, that's the easiest decision I've made all month." Later that day, they visited the town courthouse. It was small. One courtroom, one judge, one dusty flag hanging behind the bench. Judge Carver was a wiry man with a beard that looked like it had been trimmed with gardening shears. He reviewed the documents in silence, peering over his bifocals as Jonah stood beside Eden in his one good blazer. "Miss Eden," Judge Carver said, "you've been through more than any child should have. But I only have one question for you." She looked up. "Do you feel safe with Mr. McBride?" Eden didn't hesitate. "I feel safe," she said. "And seen." Carver tapped his gavel once. "Then that's good enough for me. Emergency guardianship granted pending full custody review. No fireworks, no applause. Just the sound of Kaya's tail thumping softly on the wooden floor." That night, Eden sat on the porch beside Jonah, her legs swinging from the edge of the old rocking bench. "You don't have to keep me just because of Ava," she said. "I won't be mad if you don't want to. You know, start over." Jonah looked at her for a long moment. "Eden," he said, "you're not my second chance. You're my reason to stop waiting for one." She looked away, blinking fast. "Does that mean I can change my last name?" He smiled. "You can change the whole world if you want. But, yeah, we'll start there." And for the first time, Eden leaned against his shoulder, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The next morning started like most had since Eden arrived. Quiet, careful, warm. Jonah brewed coffee. Kaya rested in her usual spot by the fire. Eden, wearing thick socks and Ava's old hoodie, sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, flipping through a book of simple piano melodies. She was humming again. Skater's Lullaby. Jonah couldn't get enough of it. Every time she sang it, it felt like Ava was still in the room, laughing, moving, teasing him with that crooked grin of hers. But today he noticed something different. Kaya hadn't lifted her head once. "Hey, girl," Jonah said gently. No response. He crouched next to her, reached for her collar. Her breathing was shallow, her body unmoving except for a faint twitch in her hind leg. "Kaya," he said louder now. Eden looked up immediately. "What's wrong?" Jonah pressed a hand to Kaya's chest. Still breathing, but slow, labored, too slow. "She's cold," he muttered. "Too cold." Eden dropped the book and crawled to Kaya's side, her small hands trembling. "She was fine last night. She chased snowflakes." Jonah moved fast. Blankets, towels, the portable space heater from the garage. He wrapped Kaya tightly, lifting her head just enough to slide a warm pad beneath her neck. "She's just tired, right?" Eden whispered, her voice cracking. Jonah didn't answer right away. He knelt, brushing Kaya's fur, trying to hide the fact that his hands were shaking too. Kaya let out a soft, pained whine. "Is she dying?" Eden asked. Jonah's throat clenched. She's old, honey. She's been strong for a long time. This might just be a cold spell. Dogs get tired too." Eden nodded, but her eyes shimmered. Then she did something Jonah hadn't seen before. She curled herself around Kaya, arms wrapped over the dog's chest cheek, pressed into her fur, and began to hum. Not the lullaby this time, a new melody, something slow, tender, full of aching hope. Her voice wavered, but she didn't stop. Jonah watched, stunned, as Kaya's ear flicked, just barely. And then, as if responding to Eden's voice, gave a tiny exhale. Jonah sat down beside them, reached for the cabin phone, and called the local vet. An hour later, Dr. Evelyn Moss arrived, a rugged woman with a silver braid and boots caked in snow. She examined Kaya quietly, then sat back on her heels. "She's not dying yet," Evelyn said gently. "But she's close. Arthritis, stress, cold strain. Her body's been fighting for a long time, and now it's catching up. Can we do anything? Jonah asked. Warmth, rest, keep her calm. If she makes it through the next 24 hours, she might bounce back for a little while. But she hesitated. It's time to prepare. She's earned that much. Jonah nodded, jaw clenched. Eden didn't speak during the visit, but when Evelyn stood to leave, she followed her to the door and whispered, "Can I be the one to stay with her tonight?" Evelyn looked at Jonah. "She's earned that too," he said. That night, Eden didn't sleep in the guest room. She laid a sleeping bag beside Kaya's bed, brought the music box over, and played it softly every hour. Each time the tune ran out, she wound it again, and again, and again. Jonah checked in once around midnight. Eden was awake, whispering into Kaya's ear, "You found me? You don't get to leave first." Kaya let out a slow breath, eyes fluttering. "She's listening," Eden said quietly. Jonah placed a blanket over her shoulders and sat beside them for a moment. "I know what it's like to be found by her," he said, nodding to Kaya. "Feels like someone tied your soul back together with thread you didn't know you still had." Eden looked up. "She did that for both of us, didn't she?" He nodded. Around dawn, Jonah stirred from the couch, rubbing his sore shoulder as he walked toward the fire. He paused in the hallway. There, curled like a guardian angel with a heartbeat, Eden slept beside Kaya, still breathing, eyes closed, body still. The blankets had slipped, but Eden's arm remained across the dog's chest like an anchor. Jonah crouched slowly. Kaya's eyes opened, just barely. She looked at him, then at Eden, and then with effort wagged her tail once. Jonah's breath hitched. "You're still with us, girl," he whispered. "Just hang on a little longer." He didn't wake Eden. He didn't move Kaya. He just sat on the floor across from them, holding Ava's journal in his lap and quietly promising himself, "No more waiting, no more running. From now on, we stay." The first daffodils bloomed in mid-April. Tiny things, barely pushing through the frostbitten soil, but they meant something. To Jonah, they meant survival. To Eden, they meant possibility. And to Kaya, who still walked with a limp but had returned to her morning patrols of the yard, they meant everything was exactly where it should be. It had been 2 months since the night they almost lost her. 2 months since Jonah filed for permanent custody. Since Eden stopped flinching when someone knocked on the door. Since the house filled, not just with warmth, but with purpose. One morning, while folding laundry, Eden had paused at the window and said, "What if other kids like me don't have a place to go? What if they're still out there, waiting?" Jonah, standing in the hallway with a mug of coffee and Kaya at his feet, replied, "Then maybe we build them one." That was how it started, with an idea, a memory, and a promise. They called it Ava's Harbor. The old ranger outpost down the road had stood abandoned for nearly a decade. Windows shattered, paint peeling, floors warped with moisture and time. But to Jonah and Eden, it was perfect. With help from Sarah Monroe, the local school principal, and a dozen community volunteers who had quietly followed Eden's story in the town paper, they began to rebuild. New walls, new windows, bright yellow paint. Inside, Eden insisted on a music corner, with beanbags, a small keyboard, and shelves of old cassette tapes Jonah donated from his Coast Guard days. Jonah installed thick insulation, warm lighting, and emergency supplies, just in case. And in the center of the main room, they placed Ava's framed photo beside a small wooden plaque that read, "To the ones who were lost and the ones who found them." The day of the opening, a light snow fell, the kind that drifted rather than attacked. It coated the sidewalks like powdered sugar and shimmered on the railings. Eden stood out front in a simple navy coat, her hair braided back. She held a folded piece of paper in one hand and her music box in the other. "I wrote something," she whispered to Jonah, who stood beside her, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time that morning. Then read it, he said, out loud, for her. She nodded, opened the paper, and began. "When you lose someone you love, the world doesn't stop. But sometimes, you do. I stopped smiling. I stopped sleeping. I thought no one would come. But one night in the snow, someone did. He didn't look like a hero. He looked tired. But he had a dog who listened, and a heart that remembered." She paused, then looked at Kaya. "And now, we listen for others. So, if you're out there, and you're cold, and you think no one sees you, come here. We'll be waiting." By the time she finished, no one clapped, not because it wasn't beautiful, but because no one wanted to break the stillness her words had created. Jonah placed a hand on her shoulder, pride radiating from him like a second sun. Inside, Kaya lay near the music corner, her tail thumping as the first child stepped through the door. He was 6, freckles, red hair, a trash bag slung over his shoulder as a makeshift suitcase. He stopped in the doorway, unsure. Eden walked over and knelt beside him. "You like music?" she asked. The boy nodded slowly. She handed him the music box. "Then you're already part of the club." He smiled. And just like that, Ava's harbor was open. They didn't have a full staff yet, or a budget, or fancy equipment, but they had blankets and food, and most importantly, eyes that saw. Jonah spent the evening cleaning up with Sarah, the two of them laughing over burnt muffins and crooked shelves. Eden played lullabies on the keyboard, while Kaya lay underfoot, ever the watchful guardian. Later that night, back at the cabin, Eden stood on the porch wrapped in a quilt, watching the snow fall in lazy spirals. Jonah joined her. "We did it," she whispered. He looked out over the forest and the mountains beyond. "No," he replied. "You did it. You turned what broke you into something that saves." Eden didn't reply, but she leaned against him. And in the quiet of that spring snowfall, her voice rose once more, not afraid, not hidden, singing the lullaby that Ava had written, for Jonah, for Eden, for every child who had ever been lost. By summer, the forest had turned lush and green. The trail from the cabin to Ava's harbor was lined with wildflowers, tall grass, and sunlit ferns. Birds nested in the eaves, and children's laughter now echoed through what had once been silence. Eden had grown taller. Her cheeks were rosier, her voice stronger. She no longer hesitated before speaking, no longer asked permission to take up space. She belonged, and so did Kaya. Though the dog now moved slower, her steps heavier, her naps longer. But each morning, without fail, she waited at the front door until Eden laced her boots and whistled softly. That day, Eden wore a yellow sundress over jeans. Her hair was pinned back with one of Ava's old clips, a daisy-shaped barrette she'd found in Jonah's keepsake box. She looked older than 12, or maybe just whole. Jonah followed behind her down the trail to the dock, his hand clutching a small wooden object wrapped in cloth. They reached the end of the pier just as the sun began to set, casting a golden path across the water. Kaya limped beside them and lowered herself gently to the boards with a heavy breath. Eden turned to Jonah and asked quietly, "Do you remember where you found me?" He nodded. "Right there," he said, pointing to a spot near the edge where a ring of moss had grown between the planks. "I thought I was going to disappear," Eden said, "that no one would ever see me again. But I did," Jonah replied, "because she led you to me." He reached into the cloth and unwrapped a simple collar. Kaya's. The leather was worn, the tag scratched, the buckle slightly bent from years of use, but it gleamed in the setting sun like it had been made of gold. Eden took it carefully, cradling it like the music box she once wouldn't let go. She knelt beside a wooden post Jonah had installed at the dock's edge and gently fastened the collar around it. At the top of the post was a carved inscription, Eden's own handwriting etched in wood. "You found me first." Kaya rested her head on Eden's bare foot and wagged her tail once. Eden leaned down, her voice soft. "You don't have to watch anymore. You already did your part." Jonah stood quietly behind them, arms crossed, heart full. The sunset reflected in his eyes, which now held something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Kaya lifted her head one final time to look at Jonah, then at Eden. Then she sighed deeply and closed her eyes. Eden didn't cry. Not yet. She sat beside Kaya and whispered, "Now I'll help find others." Jonah walked over and sat beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "She'd be proud," he said. Eden looked out at the still water. "She already is." As the last sliver of sun dipped behind the pines, the three of them, man, girl, and dog, sat in silence. No sirens, no shouting, no fear. Just the whisper of wind, the smell of pine, and the kind of stillness that doesn't feel empty, but full. A stillness that says, "You're home." Some stories don't begin with a birth, but with a rescue. Eden's didn't start in a hospital or a nursery. It began on a frozen dock in a snowstorm, under a sky that had long forgotten the sun. It began with a whisper in the dark, "Don't let him find me." But what she didn't know then was that someone already had. A dog with a soldier's heart, a man with a scarred soul, and a mother long gone who left just enough light for her child to find her way. Jonah never expected to become a father again, not in his 50s, Not in the quiet, broken cabin he once thought would be his final stop. But when Eden came into his life, she didn't just bring Ava's memory. She brought the chance to rewrite what had once gone wrong, to love better, louder, with intention. Kaya too left her mark, not in words but in actions, in the way she stood between danger and innocence, in the way she taught a broken man how to feel again, and in how she listened to things humans sometimes can't hear. Ava's harbor now stands not just as a shelter, but as a promise that no child should go unseen, that no soul should be lost in silence, that sometimes all it takes is one person or one paw print to change a life forever. If you're out there wondering whether second chances are real, let this story be your answer. They don't always come with fireworks. Sometimes they come wrapped in snow with blue mittens, a music box, and a name whispered just loud enough for love to find it.